What a great group of speakers. Yeah, it's been a great day. So today I'm going to talk about the discussion of the role of U.S. faith leaders in advocacy for global health and development at the forefront of the Bush administration at the turn of the 21st century. So I'm going to start there. In 2002, I began the work of raising awareness on issues of HIV/AIDS and extreme poverty in Africa among right-of-center faith leaders, particularly in Nashville, Tennessee, leading a conference on AIDS in Africa, Science and Religion at Vanderbilt University. In the 1980s and into the 1990s, I'll remind you that HIV and AIDS had been a highly stigmatized disease because it was associated with the intravenous drug use and the gay community, who were victims of the culture wars. It was important for faith leaders to take a stand to reconsider all victims of the virus at home and abroad and rethink the moral implications of this disease, which was for so many, mothers and children included, a death sentence. We needed faith leaders to respond with empathy and compassion. Thus, it was important to rally conservative evangelical leaders from Middle America on this little understood pandemic because they were a key bloc who had voted President George W. Bush into office. Here, when I talk about evangelicals, I mean conservative leaders who include Christian music artists, authors, athletes, pastors, nonprofit leaders, university leaders, conference speakers, and others who have followers in the evangelical subculture. And in this talk, I'm going to highlight their role in advocacy for global health. So in the early part of the 2000s, there was a growing concern among faith-based organizations like Samaritan's Purse and World Vision, who were service providers in Africa. These groups were watching a hollowing out of societies across sub-Saharan Africa and losing the battle against the HIV/AIDS virus. Witnessing the onslaught of this pandemic ignited many to seek how to stop the disease with a unified front. There was an uncanny alignment of leaders who came together to promote awareness about the issue and tackle the disease with policy and funding. And I wanted to show some of these initial evangelical leaders. Franklin Graham, who's the son of Billy Graham and runs Samaritan's Purse. Rick and Kay Warren, who lead one of the largest megachurches in the United States, Saddleback Church in Lake Forest, California. Bishop T.D. Jakes, who's the senior pastor at the Potter's House in Dallas, Texas. Jars of Clay, which is a Grammy Award-winning band out of Nashville, who actually launched their own NGO, Blood Water. Max Lucado, who's an evangelical author and pastor in San Antonio. Michael W. Smith, another Christian music artist out of Nashville. This is a picture of Bono with Senator Bill Frist in 2001, and they were in Africa looking at the HIV/AIDS clinics even then. And then Tony Campolo, who's a more progressive evangelical, who's one of the first to really champion HIV/AIDS in Africa among evangelicals. There was also a book, The Awake Project, and an album, In the Name of Love, and the Warrens led a series of AIDS summits at Saddleback called Disturbing Voices. And these were just some of the products coming out of the evangelical subculture to promote awareness, destigmatizing the disease. Secretary Condoleezza Rice, speechwriter Mike Gerson, Secretary-Treasurer Tommy Thompson, and Senate Majority Leader Dr. Bill Frist were among the key advisors to President Bush to consider the launch of what became PEPFAR, the President's Emergency Plan for AIDS Relief. And this legislation is perhaps the legacy of the Bush administration in hindsight, which, as you know, provided a historic amount of funding for a single virus. To put this in perspective, in 2002, less than 50,000 people in sub-Saharan Africa had access to antiretroviral medication, and today more than 14 million people have access to ARVs thanks to this legislation. So during the 8 years tenure of the Bush administration, faith leaders from all faiths and denominations and faith-based organizations in the U.S. and in developing nations united with governments and their ministries of health around the world to build legislation and infrastructure to confront this deeply moral issue of saving lives from a virus that had no cure. Beyond PEPFAR, the faith community advocated for the funding for the Global Fund to fight HIV/AIDS, TB, and malaria. Faith leaders also supported the Millennium Challenge Corporation to provide roads and clean water in developing nations as a supplement to the funding for global health. And faith leaders took up the mantra to make poverty history and begin to understand the systemic nature of global health and development. President Obama picked up the mantle of leadership in global health and continued with strong, steady funding during his administration for foreign assistance. Faith leaders from the left to the right during these years provided a sustained and constant presence to continue to support global health funding levels through letters, meetings with congressional representatives, and as service providers tackling disease and poverty. And you'll see during these years, there was a plateaued level of funding during that administration. During Obama's second term, Melinda Gates launched a new priority issue for her and the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, International Family Planning. Quickly, the foundation realized that in order to advance this topic among conservatives, including those in Congress, they would also need the backing of the right-of-center faith community to advance policy and funding. To rally evangelicals, they supported a faith-based coalition for healthy mothers and children worldwide with a grant to Hope Through Healing Hands, which is founded by Senator Bill Frist and directed by myself. We engaged, educated, and activated faith leaders from across the nation to join this coalition and sign letters in support of robust funding for international family planning. This took research, experimenting with language, and transparency with the facts to build credibility and gravitas in a community that formerly believed that U.S. funding supported abortion. With careful collaboration, we were able to build a coalition with more than 200 faith leaders who supported international family planning with an in-depth understanding of its critical intervention in the spectrum of maternal and child health. And with the support of faith leaders across the U.S., Congress has upheld steady funding for international family planning accounts with USAID since the Obama administration. And just here quickly, this is Melinda at the London Summit on Family Planning in 2012. And then this is an event we hosted in Nashville. Amy Grant, a Grammy Award-winning artist, interviewed Melinda with about 75 faith leaders. This is another event at Belmont University in Nashville with Melinda with Olympic gold medalist Scott Hamilton, who's also an evangelical Christian, and Senator Bill Frist. And this is a group of about 25 leading faith leaders across the U.S. that we took to the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation for a half day to learn more about family planning and spend some time with Melinda. Yet with the advent of the Trump presidency, we've been faced with an administration who wants to cut foreign assistance by a minimum of 33%. This year, the recommended cut is less severe, but it is still draconian at 24% overall. We found that though Trump enjoys an approval rating of more than 70% among church-going evangelicals, our faith leaders were still willing to contest this recommended cut in the budget for foreign assistance by signing letters to appropriators in Congress asking to restore funding for the entire international affairs account, as well as important niche issues like family planning, nutrition, and the Global Fund. So here's just a line of funding, and just as a side note, the recommended amount in 2018, as you may know, was $7.9 billion, and in 2019 it was 8.3, and then this year it's at 8.0, or $8 billion. The amazing news is that Congress has held the line on funding for the entire 150 account for the past 2 years for both fiscal year 18 and fiscal year 19 budgets, including full funding levels for PEPFAR, Global Fund, and International Family Planning. This year, nutrition received an increase for fiscal year 19. Faith leaders from across the nation championed global nutrition funding through USAID last year with over 225 signatories on a letter to Congress, thanks to the leadership of the Faith-Based Coalition for Global Nutrition, led by the 2030 Collaborative, with support from the Eleanor Crook Foundation. We partnered with key groups including Food for the Hungry, Catholic Relief Services, Bread for the World, and Christian Connections in International Health with a united front of support for advocacy. Congress responded with the first increase of $20 million in over a decade. We are optimistic to see even more funding this year for fiscal year 20 budget and nutrition. So this brief historical overview of the past 3 administrations highlights just a few moments when U.S. faith leaders, albeit namely conservative, have played a pivotal role as influencers to educate the public and their parishioners, stand for funding and change, and provide a sustained presence of leadership backing Congress's bipartisan effort to fund foreign assistance. Global health is a moral issue, and it's critical we continue to engage religious leaders for advocacy across the political and theological spectrum today more than ever. Thank you.